Hello and welcome to the A&P. I am Alex Johansen and my co-host Patrick McCallum. Patrick,
Hello, everyone. How are you getting on?
we're having logical discussions about the state of the world. Let's get into it, brother. Hello and welcome to the A&P. Patrick, I understand you have a friend coming in from the outside. Who are we going to be talking with today about Ms. Natasha Hausdorff?
I'm a friend of mine from my part of the world called Doc Guinness.
Oh, Doc Guinness,
Really,
huh?
really, yes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Doc Guinness. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to give my opinion.
Here we go. All right, we're going to start this off. This is an Oxford Union debate. This is
Okay.
Natasha Hausdorff. The proposition is the House believes Israel is an apartheid state responsible for genocide. Big word. We talked about that in the last one of these that we did. So let's go.
Yes.
Here we go.
Hamas has wounded us. They are responsible for all the destruction. All the destruction is on them. May God settle the score with Hamas, take revenge on Hamas. They destroyed our lives. These are the words of Palestinians in Gaza. Leaving Jabalia a couple of weeks ago, interviewed by Israeli journalist Ohad Chemo from Channel 12. These are the voices that Hamas and the members of the proposition don't want you to hear. These are the voices they want you to silence. We want you to rule, they say. We don't want Hamas. They took away the humanitarian aid. We will be killed if we say anything. The Jews bring us food, give us humanitarian corridor.
So what happens is as USAID, UNRWA, and other agencies attempt to push assets and food and water that's potable into the system, a huge percentage of that is ripped off the top by Hamas, and then those assets are used to purchase other things, right? So
Yeah, that makes sense. Most organizations would do that, yes.
right, but a lot of it has to do with NGOs that take control of monies and assets that are shipped out to them to perform a task, and then that task isn't performed. What do you got, Doc?
Yeah, obviously that's like the purpose of that aid is actually to aid the people in Palestine. It's not to finance Hamas. So yeah.
Right. So understanding that Palestine is actually a Roman construction, and Palestinians before 1948 were all of the people in that area, to include Arabs, Jews, Druze, all those people. So when the League decided to have the British mandate in that area, all the people in that area were Palestinian, right? So before 1948, from that area, if you were a Jew, your passport said Palestinian as part of a British mandate, right? So the country of Palestine is a fiction. It is fictive in nature, right? Because they have had no king, they've had no currency, and they've always been ruled over by the Ottoman Empire or the Romans or some other group, right? So just so you understand that when that expression is used that way. Here we go.
May God take revenge on those who uprooted and killed us. Hamas. All of the falsehoods we have heard from the proposition this evening, their support for terror, the strengthening, essentially, of the oppressors, not just Hamas, but Hezbollah, the Houthis, other Iranian proxies in Iraq and in Syria. They oppress Palestinians and Israelis alike. Now, this disgraceful motion and the pretty shameful manner in which it has been handled this evening discredits this once illustrious institution. And that Jewish students have also felt intimidated from attending tonight is an extremely sad state of affairs.
So this is a thing, this anti-Semitic thing that's going through colleges in almost every G7 country in the world. In the United States, Columbia University in New York, and a lot of the other big universities are having an issue with Jewish students being I don't even know how to put it, just distress has been laid at their feet for being Jewish, right?
Are they being attacked, or are they being physically attacked or verbally?
Well, verbally attacked, but they're being physically barred from entering a space, right? So when an individual commits assault, right, that is a credible threat. Battery is the physical contact between two humans functionally, legally, right? So if I tell you, hey, Doc Guinness, I'm gonna kick your ass, and you're like, well, that's a credible threat, so that's considered assault, right? But if I actually punch old Doc Guinness in the nose there, right, that's battery, right? But the physical act of barring somebody access to a place is a form of battery, because if you are attempting to move freely through a space to get to a place where you're going to do a thing, and on an American university you have free access as a student with an appropriate ID to go to your class, and then you are stopped from doing so, and if they touch you in that process, then they have battered you, right? You are not allowed to stop someone's forward progress toward a place where they're allowed to be, right? So a lot of the Constitution of the United States is about how the government stays out of your way while you do a thing. And then if someone stops you from free egress or ingress, then they have violated you in some fashion, right? And there's civil code and there's penal code that relates to that kind of stuff, right? So Jewish students being physically barred is not an acceptable mode, right? So here we go.
That seems thoroughly illegal.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
But I think anyone watching this debate will probably understand why. This is a dark moment in the Oxford Union's history, and as a member of this institution and a committed attendee in my time at this university, I think it is a very sad day on that front too. Now, those who cannot argue their case flee like cowards, like Norman Finkelstein, who pulled out at the last moment and in fact now seems to be scheduled to speak tomorrow unopposed, or like Muhammad al-Kurd, who also, like a coward, left after his speech because he could not face the truth that you have heard from the opposition benches.
I don't think that that's the right answer. I think if you have an opinion in the marketplace of ideas, you should stand for those things and you should stand tall.
Yes.
But strategically, I think if they're not going to look good on video, it's the smart choice.
Yes, that's probably what they did. You have to remember, a lot of these organizations are masters of image. The image of the martyr, the image of long suffering.
That is a propaganda move functionally, right? Like, well, no, I said my thing and nobody said anything back. Yeah, that's because you didn't show up when you were supposed to and put those concepts out there in the marketplace of ideas to have them shot down because they're either reprehensible or syllogistically they just can't hang, right? You can't create true and correct premises for true and correct conclusions because there's fault in your reasoning, and it is going to be so glaringly obvious when you get up there that that is the case that you just don't go. No, that's not. No, I would never. If Patrick and I have a disagreement, Doc, what happens is we talk about it until we form some kind of concept that purports with reality as best it can, right? I want to believe as many true things as possible.
That's what rational people do.
Yes, yes.
So you're telling me they're not rational, Doc Guinness? Is that what you got? Is that what you're telling me, bud?
Yeah, they're not interested in having a purely rational conversation, I suspect.
So they just want their opinion to be correct, and that's just going to be good enough. They believe a thing, therefore that thing is true.
That's just generally how people who, again, live in theocracies and really believe in these religions, that's how they think. Yeah.
This debate has been predicated on a slew of falsehoods and misinformation. And in answer to the lady's point from the floor,
Sacramento homeowners, are you missing out on $10,000? SMUD is offering thousands to homeowners.
red lines have been crossed this evening. I don't just refer to support for terrorism And to law enforcement watching, I do highlight Section 12(1)(a) of the Terrorism Act 2000. Calling the 7th of October a heroic act is something that is and ought to be recognized as unlawful in this country. But we've also heard made-up facts.
That is a huge point of contention of this. What happened on October 7th when the Hamas came out of Gaza and attacked into the kibbutzes and generated 17,000 dead, wounded, and other horrific crimes should be,
Yes.
like this barrister says, an act of terrorism. And any support of that act of terrorism is counter to what is in good faith or good nature for the people all across the G7 countries, to include Israel, obviously, because they're the ones that were
Yes.
attacked. And there's other nuance here that we'll get into, but we can get that later. Doc, you got anything on that?
Completely agree. That would seem to be what you'd expect to be the international norms.
So that purports with reality, Patrick? That sounds about right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Israel was
Made up
attacking.
allegations, made up quotes. No, Ben-Gurion did not say that he wanted to expel the Arabs. He said that attackers would be removed. He called on the Arabs to join the Jews in building the state of Israel. And his quote was, "We do not want to expel the Arabs. We do not have to expel the Arabs." The Israeli Arab who was ejected from this chamber in a pretty shameful development and an exhibition of double standards, which unfortunately Israelis, both Jewish and Arab, have come to acknowledge and expect. He is proof of the 20% of Israel's population that are the only free Arabs in the Middle East, that live with full citizen rights, and that put the lie to everything that you have heard from the opposition this evening. I dream, in fact, of a day when people stop making up those falsehoods, those allegations, those lies, when people stop making up those quotes, because even Benny Morris acknowledged he was mistaken when he reported it. And a little bit of research, ladies and gentlemen, which is something this university is so good, I think, at instilling in its students, would have assisted the opposition substantially in this debate. We heard the essence, essentially, of the advice, the optimism from the opposition, from the proposition benches. The Israelis, what should they do? They should live in Palestine and under Palestinian rule. We saw the result of 2 reservists losing their way and finding themselves in Ramallah in the year 2000. When they went to a local police station for help, they were lynched. Their livers were eaten. And that image of one of their attackers holding up his bloodied hands to the window towards the baying crowd below, that image of the red hand has been a central part of the propaganda initiative so that Hollywood members have been wearing red badges and celebrating the slaughter of Jews and urging it to continue.
I don't think that the slaughter of any people is acceptable. That doesn't seem to be the right thing. And that red hand has become this symbol of 2 young people trying to find their way and being absolutely eviscerated physically, and then there being some representation is absolutely reprehensible. It makes me sick to my stomach. Oh, it bothers me.
You know,
another way to think of it is that if some of the Arabs from the Palestinian side, if they had wandered into Israel, could anything like that ever happen?
Absolutely not, Patrick.
It's just totally unimaginable, and that's the difference.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
This is not a chicken and an egg scenario. This is not a situation, and we've heard so many examples from the proposition so far. Israel has done X, Y, Z, which have never been shown or been followed massacres of Jews. The Hebron massacre in 1929. In fact, Arabs have been massacring Jews in the Middle East for centuries. This is not a
Facts. Those are facts.
chicken and an egg scenario. But we have been asked for historical and we've been asked specifically for historical context, and what I'm going to provide to you is something that hasn't come up, which is extraordinary in the context of a discussion of two legal terms, genocide, apartheid. The lack of historical context and the lack of legal context has been palpable. But I am here, so fear not, ladies and gentlemen. Apartheid. Apartheid and genocide. Well, like colonialism, ethnic cleansing, occupation, all of the other blood libels that we've heard.
Blood libel. That's a good term. So I think part of the issue here is that one side is using terms incorrectly and then screaming as loud as they can until somebody perceives that they're correct, right? So let's say, Doc, let's say me and Patrick are having a discussion and I take a word and I use it and then I assign it a different meaning later, right? So let's say we're having a syllogistic style argument where I have a true and correct premises, but then I change the meaning of a word to make a conclusion that doesn't fit my syllogistic setup for my premises, right? If I do that, then what I'm doing is I'm being dishonest, right? And I think that's a lot of what's going on here. Does that make sense, Patrick?
Well, it's very much about using language to to basically make people feel moral indignation when maybe they're not justified in it.
Facts. All right, but the term blood libel is a super interesting one here. I think she's going to go into it more. I hope she does. I've seen her in other interviews, and she goes pretty deep into it. I saw her on with Konstantin Kisin on trigonometry, and she went into it pretty seriously. And I'm thinking we might have to pick that one up for the next part of this arc there, Patrick. But we'll take a look at it before we do that.
Yes,
that's a long video. That's going to be triple arced, I'm sure, because it is just so dense. Here we go.
From the proposition benches this evening. The insidious nature of these allegations is that they take the victims of a crime and they accuse those victims of committing the very crime that was imposed on them. Apartheid is a prime example. Where is there apartheid in this region, ladies and gentlemen? If we just look at the area from the river to the sea, the West Bank, Palestinian-controlled territory, and yes, the Palestinians have self-governance. They have an autonomy after the Oslo Accords established in areas A and B, where that self-governance has meant that part of the world is Jew-free.
So in Judea and Samaria, they have those areas that she's talking about where they do not allow Jews in space that is nominally, per 1948, supposed to be Israel territory. But yeah, that's what she's saying is specifically true. So there is an apartheid, but the apartheid is in the West Bank, which is west of Jordan into those areas A and B in Judea and Samaria.
My understanding as well is that the Jewish people in all the Muslim countries have essentially mostly left those countries as well and had to.
Well, they didn't just leave them. For the most part, they either had to pay a thing called the jizya, which is like protection money out of the Quran, or they were just flat out killed or driven from their homes, right? All of their assets were seized and they had no choice but to either leave or die. Some of them chose to die. A lot of them chose to leave. And the ones that did stay, again, were stuck with paying the jizya.
Somewhere.
Well.
Jew-free also, as in Gaza, since Israel's withdrawal in 2005. Every Jew was ripped from their homes. Even the dead ones were dug up so that they could not be desecrated when that territory was handed over to Palestinian self-governance. There is apartheid, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, she puts it very, very well there.
Is another perfect example of complete
Yes,
nonsense that seems to be opium for the masses. Gaza has a border with Egypt, and it is somewhere, unlike everyone who has spoken in this debate, I actually went to in September on the ground in Gaza and inspecting the tunnels that exist under the border between Gaza and the Egyptians. One of them was big enough to drive military-grade vehicles through. There was soot on the walls because of the vehicles that had come backwards and forwards, resupplying Hamas with Iranian military might right under an Egyptian command tower. So I invite anyone who is taken in by this nonsense simply to look at a map.
If you look at the border between Israel and Gaza and Egypt and Gaza, the border wall that goes into the Sinai Peninsula from the southern end of the Gaza Strip into Egypt, that wall is much bigger. It is much more difficult to get through that than it would be to get into Israel. So that block there, and then for a huge portion from 1948, I believe, until 1967, Egypt was nominally in control of the Gaza Strip. They were the parent entity until they passed it off. And then at that point, it was Israelis, Jews, and Palestinians who are Arab, right? We talked about that before. So the Palestinians are Arab before they're anything else, right? And the rest of the Arab nations just don't want the Palestinians. That's a fact. Or they would already be somewhere else. And there wouldn't be millions upon millions of refugees who get their status from their parents, which isn't a thing that is done with any other refugees on the planet. So UNRWA and some other entities have done that.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that, Alex. What does that mean? They pass down the refugee status. You go deep into that.
So when there is a situation where refugees occur, right? What happens is that you're a refugee until you get rehomed, and anybody not under the UNRWA umbrella is going to be resettled somewhere. Right, they'll be resettled somewhere. The world will work it out. We'll get you to a place, New Mexico, Canada, some other G7 country. Like we'll get you there, right? But for some reason, refugee status specifically for Palestinians is given to your children. So let's say two parents are refugees and they have 9 children. All 9 of those children are then given the refugee status. And then if you don't contribute as a G7 country through ESG and other methods to UNRWA to aid these people to get more money, they call you a racist, or they call your company a racist. And then they functionally force you to have proper ESG ratings for your company, which allow you to make all kinds of different kinds of deals at the corporate level. You get shamed into doing it, right? So it's pretty horrible. But there hasn't been another situation I'm aware of where your children get your refugee status, because your children aren't refugees. You were refugees. And now we're from 1948 to 1967 to now, everyone who has been born in that area who is of Palestinian lineage of Arab nature is considered a refugee. So these arguments for genocide and all that stuff are very strange, because there are millions upon millions more of them from when the initial refugee status was established.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if it's a genocide, then presumably that would mean then that their populations are going down. And yeah, no.
At the very least, decimated 1 in 10. At the very least, 1 in 10 dead, right? But it's not like that. Their population has grown exponentially. And that's not functionally how that word works. Genocide does not mean whatever they're saying it's trying to mean here. It's just a buzzword that says a horrible thing has happened. I'm assigning it this value, even though it is the wrong value. Right? It's like if I handed you 2 oranges and said, here's 19 oranges, you'd say, that's 2 oranges, Alex. And I'd be like, oh no, Doc Guinness, that's 19 oranges, because I said. And you're holding 1 orange in each hand and saying, your math sucks, bro. Like, that's bad, right? That doesn't work. That doesn't perform with reality.
It's highly effective rhetoric, though. It's like, even though it's not true, it's highly effective in getting people to feel, I guess,
morally superior.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets people into the cause as well.
Crazy. Here we go.
You have heard debunked by those that have grown up in Israel and experienced it, the opportunities that Israeli Arabs have. The lie is perpetrated by infantilizing the Palestinians and ignoring the self-governance that exists in Gaza, in the West Bank, and organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch.
Hey, Doc Guinness, do you remember the conversation we had about infantilizing? Remember a piece of that conversation we had?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think this is at large scale, right? Infantilization of a people to give them some kind of advantage so we can create a moral and ethical conundrum that doesn't exist. Does that feel right?
Yeah, I guess I would probably use stronger terms. But yes, like as in people motivated by essentially conspiracy theories. But yeah.
Okay, Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree there. It's, as I was saying, I've seen a lot of the protests in my own country. And actually, a lot of protesters I know to see personally, they haven't, as I say, they jump on every cause that will be floating around the internet.
So they don't research the proposition. They just want to feel morally or ethically superior, so they just jump on the bandwagon.
Yes. These are probably the same people, if they show homeless on the street, will step over the homeless while they're protesting for Palestinians, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, is that like the gays for Gaza or what, queers for Palestine?
Oh yes, yes, I've seen that. Yes, I've seen that.
Or chickens, or chickens for Chick-fil-A. I'm a chicken for Chick-fil-A. You're about to be a chicken sandwich, bud. You done messed up.
I did say that to a young man one time. I said, if you go over to any of these Arab countries and wave the LGBT flag, see how far you get.
Oh no! He'd get a flight off the next large building is what he would get, face first into concrete, and then everybody would cheer. So here we go.
Yeah, they want to take advantage of all the rights and freedoms, but they don't want to have to pay the price. And this is kind of the price, is you need to prevent people having power who won't respect them.
Yeah. Yes. There is a price to be paid, and people don't want to pay the price. They just want to run their mouth. I have an opinion. Yeah. Is it reasoned? Or at least maybe well-reasoned? No, I just want to say a thing to make me feel more morally and ethically superior to you because you thought about it. But I didn't have to think about it because I'm already right. No, you're not already right, Chief. No. That's not how this works. How about, here we go. I got an idea. Hey, Doc, how about this? How about we all put our concepts out there, have a marketplace of ideas, debate about it, find out which one purports best with reality and is most advantageous to all of the people in the space, and then do that. We could do that, right, Doc? Maybe?
Yeah, and then we could live prosperous, free lives where we're not killing each other for stupid reasons. Yeah, sounds great.
And at the same time, not having government interfere with my ability to have a successful and wonderful life with my beautiful lady and my children or whatever. Oh, Utopia. Utopia, I cry for thee. Come to me. Come to me. Oh, Utopia.
Yeah. Sounds like a TV show.
Right, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Hey, I'll be the dad, Patrick. Yeah. You can be the crazy uncle, and old Doc Guinness could be our primary care physician. What do you say?
Yeah, no, I love that, but in actual fact, that's actually what happens when everyone's rational.
Yes.
Well, we can talk about why things are more irrational in another episode, or probably not even online, because we would probably all get canned if we talked about that kind of reality. That would probably, the YouTube algorithm would be like, oh, hell no, you don't get to do that here. You don't get to purport with reality, Alex Johansen. No. You're not the fellow we're going to let do that. Your platform's really small. Get bent, helmet, right? Anyway, let's get back to Ms. Hausdorff.
About what the position is. They conflate Israeli Arabs, such as the gentleman who was ejected from this chamber. They conflate Israeli Arabs with those who have self-determination under the autonomy of the Palestinian Authority. But then we come to this obscene allegation of genocide. And yes, the term coined by the Jewish jurist Raphael Lemkin in the aftermath of the Holocaust to provide a legal terminology to the Jewish experience of being targeted because they were Jews for extermination. And when the proposition referred to the definition, they left out two very critical words, as such. This is to do with intentionally targeting a group as such, because of the group that they belong to. That was the Jewish experience in the Holocaust. It was also the experience of Jews on the 7th of October, when those acts that delusional third speaker referred to as heroic deliberately targeted Jews because they were Jews for rape, slaughter, torture, mutilation, and kidnap. If they cannot acknowledge that, they have much bigger problems than the ones that they profess to you this evening. Genocide is a slur being alleged against the real victims of genocide in this case, because it is providing a legal hook. A legal hook. I'm glad actually that there is an opportunity for someone to be heard that can speak about what the ICJ actually found so far in the genocide case. Because unlike the speakers who have been invited this term, including Husam Zumlot, who repeatedly lies about what was found by the International Court of Justice in their provisional measures order, and unfortunately he wasn't challenged when he was here as a guest earlier this term, the ICJ has not found that there is plausible genocide or a risk of plausible genocide or anything of the sort. And I honestly thought that after Joan Donoghue, the former president of the ICJ, went on Hard Talk on the BBC to correct this falsehood, it would stop being repeated, but clearly not in institutions like the Oxford Union.
So I think Doc Guinness was right when he said that this is being used as a hook, just like she just said. Remember when you said that, Doc, you were talking about how they're using terms incorrectly, right? Well, I kind of brought it up, but you actually
intentionally, yeah.
Right, intentionally.
It's basically people really don't know what the word means generally. They just know this means someone is like a bunch of they're horrific, and so it's basically it's just a term being used to generate certain feelings.
Right. Well, do you
rile up the crowd, as they say long ago?
Say that again, Patrick.
To rile up the crowd.
Right. So do you know the first treaty that Nazi Germany had with an outside entity? Do you know with whom that treaty was with?
I'm not familiar. It's very familiar with that part of history. So go ahead, tell me.
Give it a guess, Patrick. Huh?
The Vatican.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I know.
The Catholic Church. 100%.
Yes.
And then
Vatican City, yes.
Right. But the initial rhetoric was that the Jews were responsible for a thing called deicide, the killing of the Christ, right? So that opened up the floodgates. And then they got all that money and all that support from that entity, and it really shotgunned them into the ability to do a lot of really, really bad things. Anyway, here we go.
Genocide is simply the latest version of the blood libel that is being propagated against Jews because they are Jews. And it is a blood libel not because it is targeting Jews, but because it is false. It is the falsehoods that have been coming out of the proposition benches this evening that are nothing new, because unfortunately, the oldest hatred, the hatred of the Jews, goes hand in hand with lies about them. Then we had this notion of colonialism. When one considers who the indigenous people in that territory are, Jews, indigenous to Judea, the notion that Israel is a colonial entity is laughable. One only needs to look at the archaeology. One of the major focuses, though, of this allegation of genocide is the falsehoods that we've heard about the last 13 months of Israel's campaign against Hamas and other Palestinian terrorist groups in Gaza. And when I was there, I also witnessed the challenges that the IDF was dealing with. Civilian houses booby-trapped in order to try and kill as many IDF soldiers as possible as they sweep through these areas seeking to evacuate civilians and target the Hamas who embed themselves in them.
So we talked about that before. The Hamas were
we talked about that in the previous episode.
Right. The Hamas were putting civilians in front of, and then also causing it so that no individuals in the Gaza Strip could have safe egress. So when Israel dropped leaflets and made phone calls and said, hey, head this way to make sure that you go to safety, Hamas would then booby trap the whole area. So any civilians that would leave out that way would cause excessive civilian deaths. And then they would say that the IDF and Israel caused those deaths when in fact they were self-inflicted to inflate those numbers. And again, not genocide because their population is functionally exploded, right? And then they blow their own people up to gain advantage and then lie about it later. Like, it's absolutely reprehensible.
But we have to remember too, also, no matter every war zone, there's always going to be civilian casualties, either caused by Hamas or the IDF. That's going to always go without saying. That mistakes are always going to happen in war. That goes without a shadow of doubt, no matter how careful you try to be.
Yeah, but there is a different attitude in terms of if a regime wants to protect its civilians, that's somewhat different than if it considers them expendable.
Right. So it
We
functionally
all,
means that
we all know that Hamas see
Hamas,
their civilians completely as expendable. They wouldn't put arms stashes underneath hospitals if they
in
didn't see them
schools, right?
as
Well,
other than
they're bad
yeah.
faith actors. They're horrific bad faith actors, right? And then they're being resupplied on the Egypt side so they can continue to commit massive, massive violations of like people's ability to live the best life that they can. They're used as physical pawns. These are conscious, sapient human beings that are being destroyed at political whim because someone wants to say, I am right and I am so right that I will kill my own people. Again, that's reprehensible. Like, makes me sick to my stomach. I mean, like worse than when I have dairy.
Notion that even the use of human shields that Hamas is proud of was disputed this evening starts to reveal the ridiculous position that the proposition have adopted. But there are root causes here, very important root causes that actually go hand in hand with all of the falsehoods that we have heard. It is either being put to you from a position of ignorance, or there is something far more malicious behind the falsehoods that have been repeated, emphasized, embellished even over the course of this evening. Indoctrination is at the core of the perpetuation of this conflict. When Palestinian kids are taught from kindergarten up that the highest calling in life is to slaughter as many Jews as possible and become a martyr, peace is being pushed further and further away.
Are you aware that there are some Islamic countries that pay a dividend to those who kill Jews? And it's
Yes,
well
I've seen
cataloged and well represented.
Yeah,
You killed X amount of Jews, you get X amount of dollars for the rest of your natural life.
Yes,
right?
I've seen that. Iran actually is one of the main supporters behind that doctrine.
Yeah, like every Jew has a bounty on their head, all of them, right? That's a fatwa, and that is, I don't know how the rest of the world can accept that there is an obvious fatwa in play at all times against all Jews everywhere in the world, not just in Israel, everywhere.
Yes.
If you can show you've killed a Jew, you get paid. Oh, bro, like every time I think about that, it just makes me just,
Yeah. I genuinely didn't know that.
I only heard about, I only researched this recently myself, I'll be honest with you.
This has been around for decades upon decades,
and
it's linked to the Quran's thing with the jizya, right? It's linked to the religion, and that well, like that's even crazier, right? So if I can't make you pay the jizya, then I will pay someone to kill you, right? That's disgusting on its face. And then all the other implications of that is it's even worse, right? Anyway, I'm going to stop being emotional, listen to Miss Hausdorff some more, and I'll probably get more emotional as we go. But it's just me. I'm an emotional fella, Patrick. It's just the way it is.
I think you're actually taking all this stuff very well and very logically.
Yeah.
You know,
you are handling quite well, Ashley.
Oh, when you can't cry, Doc, you got to do something. And all I can really think to do is become logical and maybe be a voice for reason. Like that's all I can really think to do, because this bothers me, and it should bother everyone that this is the case. This is the reality of the world that we live in, and to think otherwise does not purport with reality. It means you're being a pawn in someone's game. If you don't go to the marketplace of ideas and understand that there is a disgusting thing that is happening to a group of people because they are a group of people, like it's just sickening. Anyway, here we go.
Of the terrorists who crossed the border on the 7th of October were educated in UNRWA-run schools. It is a matter of public record what the Palestinian Authority approved curriculum teaches in these UNRWA-run schools. And in fact, when I was on Trigonometry, the podcast, only a few months ago, they had the great initiative of playing some of Palestinian children's TV programs as part of that interview.
Patrick, have you seen those videos? of what they teach those kids?
Yes, I've actually researched the trigonometry episode. I actually watched that, and it's shocking.
Doc Guinness, are you aware of what they teach these kids in Gaza through UNRWA, which is supported by every G7 country in the world?
No, I'm not aware of it, but I imagine it's probably Islamic fundamentalism.
Functionally, so from age 5 or even younger, they're taught that the highest calling that you can possibly have is to kill Jews. The highest. Now, understand in Gaza, the reason they have power and that they have food and that they have access to resources is because even though Hamas takes a huge chunk of it, Israel provides all those things to them. They're a dependent state because Hamas did not want to take all the assets they were given in 2005, right? So on top of most of those buildings in the Gaza Strip, when it was handed over in 2005, had these greenhouses. And these greenhouses made literally some of the most beautiful flowers and arrangements in the world. A business worth hundreds of millions of dollars, which could have supported more hospitals, more schools, proper education, institutes of learning, and just an amazing, beautiful place with some of the most amazingly beautiful beaches in the world. It's become a disgusting slum because the overlords there are like the worst slumlord landowners like you could possibly imagine, right? And all of those greenhouses were absolutely destroyed in 2005 and 2006. They were handed a gift from Israel, and they fucked it off. They just fucked it off. For whatever reason. We don't want a thing from the Jews. And if they really wanted to consider it, it actually falls in line with their religion. It was the most amazing form of a jizya that they could possibly have gotten. And they're like, well, no, since this came from the Jews, we're going to destroy it. It destroyed their ability to be on the world market and be a functional place. It just destroyed it.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, why? Why would you do that? Right? Again, these things just make reasonable people sick to their stomach. So yeah, their educational system as run by UNRWA was absolutely unacceptable. It's not, if you sent your child to school and this was the thing they taught, you would immediately pull your child out of school, go to the school board and go, what are you doing? What are you doing? But it was funded by G7 countries who were told if they didn't give money to this for these refugees, they were racist. And then they ended up controlling a big part of it. And that's kind of how it goes.
Exactly. And even asking questions or actually even being critical would actually would open one up to that criticism. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
and
yes.
that's horrible. Like I can't ask a question about a thing where my money or companies and corporations and governments I support are spending money on this. And that's part of the reason when USAID got locked up recently, a lot of these NGOs were losing their mind, right? So the NGO would get the money.
Yeah. And
Go ahead. Go ahead, Doc.
sorry, no, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I want to hear what you got to say first, Doc. Come on.
I was just going to say I've talked to a lot of people who were very happy when USAID was shut down, and one aid worker who was very unhappy.
Right. Well, so the thing is like USAID would authorize, without appropriate tracking of where the money go to an NGO. The people running the NGO would give themselves exorbitant salaries, taking a big chunk of that money on the front end, and then they would funnel it to a place outside of the United States where the government could not get that money back, right? Super efficient scam, super efficient, right? And the more that they look into it, they're finding that there's $800-900 trillion issue going on with waste, fraud, and abuse. And a lot of this stuff was going to places like UNRWA who had no oversight. The United States has no oversight on UNRWA. It's a UN organization, and it's really disadvantageous to the world for them to perform acts the way they're performing them. Functionally, a lot of them were actually a part of the hierarchy of Hamas, right? So they're getting it from both sides.
This stuff is essentially completely corrupt.
Yeah, completely. Here we go.
This is material that many people, especially in this country, have never been exposed to. I encourage you to view it, because it will tell you everything that you need to know about the bloodlust and the terrorism and the indoctrination that is going to push this conflict on for decades more unless it is grappled with and unless the international community's complicity in it is likewise grappled with. But it is not just the indoctrination, but also the incentivization to terror. Forgive me, I'm going to take the same amount of time as those on the opposition benches. That means I've got another 5 minutes. We have heard We have heard very little this evening about the Palestinian Authority pay for slave.
Go ahead, Patrick.
I tell you one thing, she's a tough lady.
Oh,
not being pushed around at all whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
No.
Yeah, and she is so well spoken. I am so impressed with this barrister. She is one of the best. Like I was saying, the other one that I was talking to Doc Guinness about was Simone Gold, who was interviewed by Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
She got caught up in that January 6th thing, and her problem, she was actually arrested in her home for having an opinion counter to Dr. Fauci's opinion on the coronavirus thing. It being 70% of previous SAR things, and it having a ribosome that allowed certain kinds of things to get into your system that shouldn't. So functionally, it was gene therapy and not a vaccine per her, right? And has come out since then to be most likely the truth. After years of being sat on, and then lots of pardons being issued for people that shouldn't be getting them, who should have some kind of liability. Anyway, let's get back to it.
Program, which encourages terrorism by rewarding terrorists according to how many Jews they have slaughtered, the severity of their sentence, their time in Israeli prisons. And this is directly linked to the 7th of October, because Ali Khadi and the others who spent 2 years organizing those attacks, there was nothing heroic about it, were paid salaries by the Palestinian Authority while they were organizing those barbarous medieval-style atrocities. The so-called moderates in this equation, really? They're also incentivizing the continuation of that genocidal war against the Jews. Now, one of the massive areas of misinformation this evening has been the issue of aid being provided by Israel into the Gaza Strip, being facilitated. I checked the COGAT website over the course of this debate. I had quite a lot of time on my hands, ladies and gentlemen. 1,149,932 tons of aid. That's 58,101 trucks. 1% of the international aid, the trucks that the international community has attempted to send into Gaza, Israel has stopped for security reasons. And the calorie count is significant because over 3,000 calories a day have been going into the Gaza Strip per individual there.
Think about that. 2,000 calories a day is going to be enough to support even my big fat body, right? So we're providing 3,000 calories, not we, but Israel is functionally allowing the provision of 3,000 calories per individual. That's every newborn babe to every senior citizen that resides in the Gaza Strip. And such a small portion of that has been provided to the people based on Hamas's control and their leveraging of those resources and assets to go out through Egypt to go to other places, right? So Iran and all the proxies are gaining massive amounts of aid and positive confluence of assets, and then they're literally swapping that for making tunnels, buying bombs and rockets, and doing what is obviously...
So you think they are selling the aid to buy arms?
They have to. There wouldn't be another way for them to get that, right?
Yes.
So presumably that's actually how their economy works.
Functionally,
yes,
right? Well,
much,
and then there's also so when the previous president of the United States removed a lot of the tariffs and things that the one before him had imposed, they started out of Cargies Island shipping millions of barrels of oil, right? Which is another way that they gained a lot of strength in the area to be able to support all their proxies. Again, the Houthis and Hamas and the PLO and all these organizations, which, funny enough, if they were left to their own devices, would be fighting each other because they're different brands of Muslim, right? And I don't want to go into what exactly that means, but understand that within that religion, there are sides as well. And those sides do not get along at all. And then if they didn't have a common enemy in Israel and in the Jews, they would be killing each other because of slight differences in doctrine, much like Christians have done for the past couple centuries, right?
And I think that actually explains the real reason that they need to scapegoat the Jews, is that they need an external enemy that they can blame. Otherwise, they'll have to take responsibility for the problems of their own society.
Well, there'd be internecine
yes.
warfare for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can blame someone for the problem, much like the Holocaust, same deal, right? Here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, real quick. Do you know the first group of people that were destroyed in that Holocaust? Anyone? Bueller? Kids? The first group before the Roma, the Gypsies in Europe were almost absolutely destroyed to a man and woman before they really started going after the Jews. So, here we go. Yeah, it is disgusting.
Why? Why do we not hear criticism calling out of the causes of Palestinian suffering? The quotes that I read out to you at the very beginning of my speech were against Hamas. But it's not just Hamas that has contributed to this. Where is the condemnation of Egypt? Where are the calls for Egypt to comply with its international law obligations? Those that it signed up to in the African Union Convention on Refugees, that it acceded to in 1980, to open the border and allow the passage of civilians fleeing civil disorder in Gaza. Those are its international law obligations. I haven't heard anything from the proposition on that this evening, which is why I agree with the rest of my speakers. They don't care about the Palestinians. Their focus is on the eradication of the state of Israel, and they are peddling in blood libels to seek to achieve it. We had the speaker who left.
Egypt has failed so fundamentally here. I can't even conceive of them. They're not even a part of the conversation. Like, they're not even brought up. Doc, have you heard anything about Egypt's role in all of this at all?
None besides what you've explained to me.
No, same here.
Okay.
Very, very little on this side of the world.
But that makes no sense, right? So when people are like, there's a border between Israel and Gaza, there's also a border with Egypt, who signed in those accords in 1980 that they would allow if there was civil unrest. And a war is kind of an unrest situation where civilians are being affected. I don't know why the borders weren't opened up, and they created all kinds of aid and space and the grace and mercy of a nation to do the thing they said they were going to do. Right?
Wow.
So, Patrick, if you say something to me that wrongs me and hurts me, I'm going to say, Patrick, you've done a thing that's hurt me. So let's discuss why that happened, because we're reasonable adults. And you can say, hey, man, I was a little emotional. I apologize. Took a low blow, because I had a case of the red ass. I wanted to show it. And then you and me and Doc could sit down over a Guinness with Doc Guinness and be like, hey, man, what's going on? Right? As opposed to doing that, Egypt showing grace and mercy to perform an act they said that they would perform specifically to keep civilians safe. They have fucked off that responsibility. And on the world stage, they should look like absolute shit. What should happen is the G7 countries should get together, create a space in Sinai where these Palestinians. Go ahead, Patrick. I'm sorry.
I do remember reading a headline, this must be 6-7 months ago, and the UN did pull Egypt about this. But Egypt's defense is, we don't have the resources to help them, so we're just going to close our borders. The whole world is.
So then all the money that goes to UNRWA to help those refugees should be redirected to ensure the Sinai Peninsula has the assets and resources, clean water, food, all of the things needed set up in the Sinai Peninsula out of that war zone to keep those people safe, like they signed an accord to do.
Yes.
Right? Your word is your bond. Doc Guinness' word is his bond. I know the man. Patrick, I know your word is your bond. Why is a country not held accountable to the same fucking standard as a fucking adult human? I can't fathom it.
But everyone knows that Egypt is a basket case. Let's call it a spade. We all know.
Right. Basket case or not.
Last 50 years, Egypt has been a complete and absolute basket case.
Right. Then we should get a crowbar, leverage it, and say, Egypt, look, you're failing. We're going to be using this land in this space, and as a group of G7 countries interested in the safety of civilian lives. We're going to set this up here, and no, I just need the land, Egypt. I don't need any of your assets. We've got quite enough, thank you. And set these things up to keep those people safe.
There's
right?
no way in the world. There's no way in the world Egypt would allow it. What you would need there first
But at
is
that
UN.
point, it's not up to Egypt, right? This is
Yes,
a moral and ethical question that's being answered in the worst possible way.
But the problem.
Go ahead.
But the problem is, we all know Egypt won't allow any form of international force. Let's face it, it wouldn't need an international response.
No, there's already an international force there. The Bright Star Project has been there for decades. There are NATO soldiers there on that soil right now, right? But they're answering the moral and ethical question the worst possible way, which is to say, we signed a thing, and our word is not our bond, so go get fucked.
But Egypt doesn't want, how can I put it nicely, they don't want that trouble spilling into their borders either.
Yeah, because the last time it happened, the Palestinians...
I think that's the real reason.
Yes. And I think if there were going to do it, Egypt would, they know themselves they would need a proper international response, a full international response, not
right.
NGOs.
On top of that, because they were named as the arbiter between Hamas and Israel, they got access to billions of dollars. Access to billions of dollars through the World Bank because they're the arbiter of this conflict, right? So not only are they abusing the civilians who live there, right, by not doing the thing they said they were going to do, they're also benefiting from it from the World Bank and other organizations.
But they just do not want that trouble on their borders. They don't want it inside their borders. They do not.
They likely should never have been trusted in the first place to actually fulfill their word.
Yeah, everyone knows that.
The first thing I do when I measure someone, and we have to go into some kind of contractual thing, is I give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Israel and all the other countries in that accord decided we all together we're going to do this thing. They need to be held accountable, and something needs to happen, right? And I'm trying to give appropriate solutions, but like you guys are saying, Egypt's not going to play with that, because the last time in the 60s, when they got a bunch of Palestinians in there in the Sinai Peninsula, it did not work out for Egypt at all. No. At all. And now the only way to get out of there is if you give the Egyptian government through functionally, what's that called when you pay for a thing like that? I give you money, so a bribe, right? So functionally, Gazans to get out. Yeah, I am so like, I'm schwitzing, bro. I'm really, really not doing great on this. Yeah, they're doing a wrong thing, and it just disgusts me. So here we go.
The debate, I mean, in and of itself, a rather shameful disregard for the tradition of the Oxford Union, referenced, in fact, his own case of Sheikh Jarrah, a property that was purchased in 1875 by two rabbis and put into family trust, that was then seized by Jordan when it ethnically cleansed the Jews of East Jerusalem and occupied that territory in 1948. That property that Mohammed al-Kurd was referring to came into the hands of the Jordanian custodian of enemy property. And instead of transferring the ownership of that property, which would have later even been respected, albeit being unlawful, forgive me, but the other speakers had quite a deal longer. I've been keeping time, 20 minutes on the last count. So that Jordanian custodian of enemy property issued a couple of leases over it. Now, leases require rent and they require compliance with the conditions. Neither of those have been forthcoming from the first speaker from the opposition and his cohabitants, illegal squatters who have been given time after time, in fact, 50 years of litigation by the courts in Israel, an opportunity to get their house in order. But of course, they have no regard to the law. They have no regard to the facts. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have seen on display this evening is a continuation and a perpetuation of the falsehoods against Israel in order to draw you into those falsehoods. There have been references to useful idiots this evening in response to some of the comments from the floor. I do not believe that you are useful idiots. You would not be at this institution if you were. So,
would the secretary give the speaker 1 more minute the same way, Susan?
well, I was going to go to the end of the time of the previous speaker because I stick to rules and precedent.
I like her, Patrick. She's
Yes,
awesome.
yes.
Oh, you took 23?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. 23.2 minutes? I'm getting 23.2 minutes. It's awesome.
Let us not be under any illusions here. We all know what this audience is, where your allegiances lie. You've made that very plain this evening.
Remember that 5% thing last time? Who would
Yes.
say if there was going to be a terrorist attack, less than 5% of the room raised their hand? Oh,
Yeah.
bro, Doc Guinness, check it out. So the last speaker that we watched said, raise your hand if you knew that there was going to be a terrorist attack against civilians. Would you tell someone if you knew? 5% of the room raised their hand. Like absolute cowards.
Only 5%.
Only
Only
5%.
Yeah, Jesus fucking Christ.
And this is in Britain, by the way.
You see that, Patrick? I got
Yeah.
I got Doc Guinness to swear. I knew I was going to do it before the end of this thing. Ha! Gotcha, Doc.
Oh,
Gotcha.
damn it.
It
Yeah.
happens. No, they're just words in the kit bag. All right, we got about 2 minutes
You
left
can
of
beat me
this.
out.
Yeah.
We got a clean house. We'll be all right. Let's close this thing out. She's only got a minute left, and then we can get on out of here and get on with our day, gents.
We all know what the outcome of this vote is going to be. That is not important. What is important is that ultimately the truth will out. What is important is that all of those Jewish students who were too intimidated to come tonight will have an opportunity to come not only to hear the truth in future, but in future to speak the truth. And that will be occasioned because brave members of the opposition benches this evening have called out the falsehoods, have called out the lies in the face of opposition, even from the union authorities in organizing this debate. The shame of this evening, I hope, will be overcome because in future years, there will be debates where the rules, procedure, and decorum are respected, and there will be debates when it is not just the speakers here on the opposition that are calling out these falsehoods and that are seeking a peace and a future built on real history, real law, real facts. Thank you.
Wow.
What do you think, Patrick?
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, hold on, Doc. Let
Yeah,
Patrick
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, let Patrick put his 2 cents in. You'll get your 2 cents. By the time we're done with it, we'll have $1 and we'll get on out of here. But go ahead, Patrick.
Absolutely very, very well spoken. As I said, we only see very narrow points of view over, especially my part of the world. But
Go
it
ahead,
is good to.
Go ahead, Patrick. Finish up.
It is good.
I 100% agree. We don't actually see the Israeli side of kind of what's going on at all. It really doesn't get reported in Irish media. We're actually quite biased in that regard.
We had an episode
So
about
yeah,
that.
so it's
We had an episode about state media and stuff like that. Go ahead and finish your thought, Patrick.
No, but it's, yeah, over here we do get a very narrow point of view. We have to remember a lot of our media is very state-run or state-centered.
The RTE,
So-
yeah.
Well, not just RT, they all kind of sing off the same hymn sheet pretty much.
Well, we actually researched that in one of our episodes, Doc, where we were trying to figure out who owns what media in Ireland. It was not good. The independent media is functionally, was that Domino and Garen Noon.
Yeah,
pretty much
Derek
your
Domino,
two
yeah.
independent story. Yeah, Derek Domino and Garen Noon. And Garen Noon's moving to France now. Crazy sucker.
That was an April Fool's joke, by the way. Just to
yeah.
I know. I thought
Right.
that was incredibly well
yeah.
done.
Doc, do you
Yeah.
have any opinions there yourself?
No, I think we've discussed quite a bit there. I thought it was a very, very good podcast, I think. So yeah, thank you.
Really, yeah. You're more than welcome.
Right, Doc. We'll send you an invite for one down the line if we're good with that, and you are good with that. We'd love to have you come on in. Patrick, anything you want to say in closing?
Nope, that's it. We're all good. All good indeed.
Alrighty, like, subscribe, do all the things, ring the bell. Ha ha ha! It's going to be amazing. Get on board with us. Eventually, we'll have merch, and you can wear a cool shirt that says "Don't suck, be better." The A&P. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, night, evening, whatever you're experiencing right now, and we'll catch up with you in the next one.